Hello, Frank. This is another Fast Forward from Niko's Lounge and the HTEC Group, welcoming a person who's coming from a special Silicon Valley, from Silicon Valley of healthcare. That's actually Medical Alley. And you're dedicated 16 years already your passion and knowledge and development actually to Medical Alley. I'm really curious, what's driving you in Medical Alley and in life? What's your passion about this development?
Thank you. Well, Niko, it's a pleasure to be here. We really appreciate HTEC supporting the community and having us involved. As you said, I've been doing this work for 16 years now, and my passion is very simple. I always tell people I have the greatest job in the world. I get paid to hang out with really smart people who save lives. And if we do our work well, if Medical Alley does its work well, those people can save more lives. And so it's very easy to be motivated by the work, to find passion in it, because it's a good thing in and of itself, and it's a good business to be in.
Great. We're going to share 5 questions, the big 5. When you go to South Africa, they usually say you have to hunt the big 5. What we define is big 5 actually animals that we're going to share with you, moving from the perspective of global growth, market growth, how the companies are growing, organizations, product, and personal. So with the first one on the global level, we're going to talk about the black swan, Nassim Taleb, low probability, high impact theory. So for me, it's interesting actually. How do you see now the trends going on, even outside of industry? Can we even talk, because COVID-19 is everywhere at the moment still and influencing all of us. We can say that actually now health and medicine, it's the topic that's always the first news, first question from everywhere you enter, from restaurant to the border to airplane. We have to think about the medicine. How do you see trends globally at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're realizing out of the pandemic has been how connected everything truly is, and how something that seems improbable can have really improbable outcomes. I was listening to another podcast the other day, and they talked about during the pandemic, there was a spike in demand for books. More people were at home, they wanted to read. The spike was so strong, printers ran out of paper and had to make choices about what books they could publish because there just wasn't enough paper. And we saw this sort of trend play out over and over and over again in every facet of every industry, including healthcare, where supply shortages meant you couldn't make some intermediate part, which meant you couldn't make some other part, which meant you couldn't make a critical product to save a person's life. And I think the mega trend that comes out of all of that is what we thought was interconnected. Maybe we only were seeing a little peephole of it. And in reality, the furthest parts of the world might as well be next door for how connected and how important they are to any industry, but especially healthcare during a global health pandemic.
Yeah. And do you see this speed of change, for example, that can surprise us even more in the future? Is this fast forward impact, really gonna slow down, or we're gonna expect even more changes influencing, with the faster speed?
Yeah, I think our minds have been opened. Healthcare sometimes is criticized for being slow to change, slow to adapt new innovations, and often for good reason, right? If you make a mistake, the consequence could be someone's life. So you do want a higher standard than, say, changing a video game on your phone. But one of the things I discovered, and I think all of healthcare discovered during the pandemic, was that there is a speed we can move if we get aligned to a common vision, a common set of goals, and put all of our resources behind it. Healthcare really can make transformative changes in the blink of an eye and still prove safety, prove efficacy we talked to lots and lots of companies who, because they were forced to rethink the way they had done things for a long time, they found efficiency opportunities or new ways of approaching an old problem that allowed them to move faster. And then what they've told us is they don't want to go back, that those improvements, they should have done them a long time ago, but their mindset changed. Instead of thinking, I can't move faster because, they said, I have to, and they figured it out. And it's such a powerful thing when we're motivated to solve a problem, given the constraints we have, we tend to figure out a way to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's very well said. Sometimes we ask ourselves, how democratic can we be, in these changes. For me, it's interesting how even the countries differently approached solutions now with the medical issues. With the health. I think that's a nice challenge. Yeah. How would you comment that?
It's a not discussed enough topic that the political systems and the cultures of different countries, or even in larger countries, I think of like the US, where you can have different cultures and political systems within one country, mediated the response that we had and have to the pandemic. And there probably are some things that we could say were objectively better in one place or another. But I think the biggest lesson in it is, for those of us who work in public health and for those of us who work in health innovation, to really be thinking about not just like the product, but the culture and the context it's going to go into, and how that same product treating the same condition might need to be different if it's being used in the United States versus Germany versus Serbia versus wherever, because of those cultural and political differences, which we probably all sort of knew in the back of our mind, but maybe didn't appreciate until it was really put in our face during the pandemic, and how differently different parts of the world responded to fundamentally the same issue, the same problem.
It's amazing, how many differences we can see, especially even in Europe. That's compared to US, I would say quite small. But you can just cross the border and you have totally different legislation. I'm calling up from Slovenia, and it's 2-hour country, so you have to drive very slowly unless you're already in another country, and you have already totally different issues. For example, there. Good. And if you move from the global perspective, maybe to the fast forward moves in blue ocean, let's say, in competition on value innovation by Kim Chan. There's a lot of sharks and a lot of quite big ocean of the health tech, medicine, pharmaceutical is very important at the moment. But how would you see here medical market? What are the biggest changes on the medical market at the moment happening?
Yeah, I think the single biggest change, at least I should say in the US healthcare market or medical market context, has been another mindset shift as a result of the pandemic. So things like telemedicine, remote monitoring, virtual care, they've existed for decades. You could do a phone call with your doc, 50 years ago. But the mindset was, if I need to see a doctor, I go to the clinic or I go to the hospital. And if I'm a doctor, I practice medicine at the clinic. If I'm a nurse, I practice medicine at the clinic. When all of a sudden we couldn't do that, again, faced a new set of constraints, we had to find new solutions. I think we've realized, patients, care providers, payers, government officials, innovators, that a lot of the fears we had around remote care or telemedicine were unfounded or were manageable. And so now the market has developed, right? Like technically we could do telemedicine, but it was 1% of healthcare. Now we realize, it's actually not that bad. It can work, and it's 10-15% of healthcare. And I think that number is going to grow. That's going to then change. the sort of technologies you develop, the way you market a product, the policies you might need to advocate for, the payment models, all of these things that we haven't had to think about because we designed a product for the clinic or the hospital. Now I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity to take even existing old commodity products and innovate because the site of care will change and create really significant value because the market changed when the mindset changed.
It's amazing. It's when I compare, I just get the idea. When you compare also electric cars, if you take as example, exactly. So it used to be, electric cars used to be there for. I remember I was going exactly 10 years ago. I was in Laguna Beach, and they had the first Tesla shop actually there. So I bought a hat exactly 10 years ago. There was no cars, and at that time it was like electric cars. Fun, it looks.
But in the future,
yes. And today we are talking that all the car producers, have to shift. It took like 10 years, exactly like you said. But there's some. Pandemic is bringing some additional speed to all this that we are forced, especially on health, to move much faster than we used to. Like how they said in Microsoft, two years shift in 2 months almost. But I know it's so already 10 to 15%. You would say it's telemedicine taking over already now and growing. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think like healthcare is such a giant market, right? $4 trillion in the US alone. If you had any other business where you said it went from 1% of 4 trillion to like potentially 10%, that's a giant market that almost was created almost overnight, and we're just barely tapping the potential of it. And there's still a lot of roadblocks. I would liken it to the pandemic took us from buying the hat to you can now go look at the cars, but it's not yet commonplace. But it's definitely like you can see it. It's no longer someday in the future. The future is pretty darn close.
You're having in your medical alley, you have fantastic partners, from Medtronic to Boston Scientific, 3M, many of them. And how do you see now? We opened telemedicine as one. Do you see some other also, let's say, niches or blue lagoons that will develop in medical?
Very many. It's one of the nice things of healthcare being so large that there are tons of lagoons, tons of niches that are quite large markets. Areas where we've seen a lot of activity outside of the kind of the expected telemedicine and pandemic side. We're seeing a lot more in women's health, recognition that there's been an underinvestment in the unique healthcare issues of women, especially like maternal health, prenatal health. I think of like Marani and companies like that. We're seeing a lot of activity in regenerative medicine. This is another one of those areas where the science has been at work for decades to figure out how does the body heal itself and how might we augment that. And we often think about eat healthy, exercise, keep the body strong. But there are underlying scientific principles that are now increasingly understood. And Andreessen Horowitz, the investment firm, they've talked about the biotech industry moving from scientific challenges to engineering challenges, where by understanding the basic scientific principles, you can design drugs or design regenerative products much like you would a car or a medical device. And not that that's easy, but the level of work that's involved is more manageable and predictable. So you can say with greater certainty, if this is the outcome I'm seeking, here are the things I need to do, and feel relatively confident we'll get to that outcome. We have a member company here called Miromatrix. They recently went public, spun out of the University of Minnesota, have developed technologies to take whole organs, so they're doing livers and kidneys, remove the cells, turn it into a collagen matrix, and then reperfuse it with your cells to make a fully autologous transplantable organ. So instead of, if say you had liver failure, being stuck on a waiting list for years, potentially dying because you can't get a transplant organ, being able to make a replacement organ that your body wouldn't reject. And that's technology that 10 years ago was science fiction, someday in the future. And now they're a commercial company, publicly traded, and moving towards clinical trials on that product, where it'll probably still take 4, 5, 6, 7 years, but it's in our lifetimes that these kinds of things are now happening. And that is one of those lagoons that, liver, kidney, heart, muscle, you can just keep going. And all of them are huge opportunities for innovation and improving patient outcomes.
Sounds like going to vegetable shop, would I take cucumbers, tomato, kidneys, it's just, but yeah, like you said, and I really like the quote, how you put together engineering in science,
Yeah.
Exactly. Yesterday with Alex, we were discussing, in Dushan, we just added another element at the beginning. It's design, exactly, putting the design as the first stage, the early stage where you can play, and adding science and engineering to execute at the end. It's amazing mix, actually, like you said. I mean, so technology and everything. Today, discussing with many people, and for example, in marketing, do we have digital marketing, or everything is digital marketing already? Do we have, medical technology, or technology is already included, inside?
Right. When does it go from digital marketing to it's just marketing, or medical technology is just tech? And I will say it's a pet peeve of mine that quite often we separate the tech industry and the med tech industry. And I always think, like, tech is right in it, and it's high technology, right? Med tech is tech.
Yeah. And since you mentioned Marani, also, we're really proud investors in Marani, and we just published, I believe a month ago, there was an article in Forbes, and they were pushing exactly what you said. I mean, there were women in tech, in medicine, that were looking for the niche, what's happening with the specific, this Blue Lagoon, let's say. Yeah, good. So a lot of opportunities on the markets, and I am sure that combining the big corporations in medicine with let's say accelerators. I saw MIT is having also innovation medical boot camp, and many others. So combining also startup ideas with corporate will bring this let's say quite classic industry to higher, let's say, revs and move forwards. Good. And if you think about also the fast forward of companies, what do you see as in these 16 years, maybe a project that you're most proud of working in Medical Alley?
Probably the one I'm most proud of is one we've been working on lately around supporting startup innovation, called Medical Alley Starts. We launched it officially this year, 2021, February 22nd. But we've been working on it in one form or another, for about 4 years. And it was this great insight that an entrepreneur locally, a guy named Kyle Rolfing, had, which was a lot of organizations were focused on how do we get more capital to startups, and not just in Medical Alley, but around the world. The problem of not enough startup innovation is always centered on capital. Kyle's an entrepreneur. He's raised money. He's started companies, and he counsels a lot of other entrepreneurs who always would come to him. And we hear this from others, like, I need help raising money. And he would ask them questions, get their perspective, and say, before you go and raise the money, if you did this and this and this, your company would be better set up to go raise the money. You'd get a better valuation. You'd have a higher chance of success. And so we flipped it around and said, what if we could lower the cost to start, scale, and pivot new ventures, so that whatever money you did get would go further, or you'd be in a position to raise less money to get to the same outcome. And that's involved working with these early stage startups to understand the market opportunity, the team they have in place, and what are their gaps and their resource constraints, and then finding creative ways to fill those gaps so that they can position the company, appropriately for the market, build out a great team, and then when they go to raise money, be in a really great spot for it. We piloted it in 2020, which was a challenge during the pandemic.
Yes.
Worked out some of the kinks with it, launched this year, and so far, year to date, we're in July as we're recording this, we've helped about 280 different healthcare startups in Medical Alley.
Wow.
And we're getting fantastic feedback where the companies are finding customers, they're raising capital, they're getting key hires. It's speeding up their development by helping them avoid problems that they didn't even know they were going to run into. And why I'm so proud of it is it's so very simple of having conversations to learn where the companies are at and then getting them connected to people like Kyle or like others who have that experience, not as mentors, but really as just a guide to help them say, here are the 3 most critical things, or here's the answer to that burning question that if you get wrong, your company will be structured wrong. And if you get it right, you'll be positioned for success. And so that high volume and high impact in a very short period of time, it makes me feel good that we did the work on the front end right, listened to the customers, identified root cause, and then built a simple, robust solution that, knock on wood, so far is working.
That's amazing. So it's like Y Combinator of medicine, let's say, in a focus on medicine. But how did you do it? So many online? How was it? How was the process? Do you have cohorts? I'm really curious because I work a lot with startups.
Yeah, I think this is what's made it work is we've done it so radically simple. So no cohort, no formal program. It's more like a semi-customized factory line of companies are coming in wherever they're at, whenever they're at. We meet with them. It's often been Zoom calls, but we're starting to return to in-person meetings. We hear their story. We get a sense of where they're trying to go. And then we tap into, we call it the Ready Reserve. It's a group of about 40 experienced entrepreneurs who can provide guidance and input, as well as a network of about 250 and growing investment funds, and then a huge supply chain. So the consultants, the law firms, the manufacturers, where that company can define for us, here are the 3 most critical problems we need to solve in order to get to our next milestone. And then we're going to help them find the resources for 1, 2, 3. The next company that comes in, they might have 3 different challenges, help them find those resources. So instead of pre-building the program and then fitting the company to it, we take each company as they are and fit the offer to that company. But we take advantage of 80% of the challenges are in common. So instead of it being 100% custom, right, we can respond to the 80% that are in common very, very quickly. And then for the 20% that are unique, we have the time and the space to be able to serve those, learn from them, and have it in the database, if you will, for the next time it comes up.
I love the model. So kind of tailor-made, made to measure in a way.
Yeah. And you could sort of think of it also as like accelerators and incubators provide an in-depth service to a small number of companies. We're trying to fill the gaps in between all of those accelerators and incubators by providing a more limited service, but to a high volume of companies. You combine the two in an ecosystem, and you have then a full suite of support to help those companies get off the ground.
Amazing. We work with quite some. We focus a little bit more on scale-ups. When they grow up from the accelerator stage in a way.
Right.
Accelerator stage when they get the A or B round. And here we even outsource. We have cases where we offered chief scientist officer or CDOs. Something that they can outsource. Because the speed of growth with companies many times is sourcing. One is investment, but even when you get investment, I was talking last week to Fox, they get 650 million. So what now? I cannot employ so fast as much money I have. So how do I find a way to speed up also this growth, and not just speed? How do I find the right partner that's flexible
Yep.
compared to my resources, needs, and tailor-made, like you said, to development and rounds of investments that are usually connected. Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly it. And like part of our goal is we want to get more companies to that scale up stage. So there's a bigger pool of potential successes, but then also a bigger pool of customers for the broad supply chain where lots of jobs and lots of economic activity occurs. And so that like handoff is so important. And often it is around those shared resources where they could hire it directly and spend a bunch of time and a bunch of money doing something that's probably not their expertise, or we help them find that partner who that's what they do all day. And they're going to be able to do it better and more efficiently. And they can leverage that resource instead of paying 5x to get half of the value.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing. I would love to write another extra article about this, because I think it's so important, because I didn't know all the details behind, and I think
anytime.
Great. So we'll talk even more about it. I'm really passionate for I wrote a book 21 years ago about venture capital, and already then, because we were in necessity to find the resources for our company, and through that time, we developed actually the programs and things. I was in the first generation of Y Combinator, working with them when they visited Europe, and with Seed Camp and others. And really the model that was developed then, it was revolution. And what you're bringing now, I see it exactly like the next stage, next level, evolution of the model that was developed at that time. Yeah.
Very cool.
What do you think you will double down, for example, in Medical Alley? Where are you going to focus in the future? Is this with the startups or with the big corporations, or are you gonna mix and match both of them?
Yeah, we think having the involvement of the big to small and the in between is critical to a healthy ecosystem. And one of the things we find that connects all of them is, telling the story of innovation. And so we've doubled down, and we'll probably double down again on amplifying the amazing stories that come out of this industry and this community. Even if you're one of the large companies, getting your message out, building awareness of your next innovation or of your next campaign or your need for talent is important. And if you're a small or medium-sized company, or maybe you're a company moving into healthcare from one industry like Best Buy in the retailing, now coming into healthcare, having a platform to tell that story so you can attract talent, attract customers, attract partners, we've found is incredibly powerful and valuable. And we can build it in a way that a Medtronic or a 3M can use it, a startup can use it, and a company in between can benefit from it. And the more each of them uses it, the more valuable that content and distribution asset becomes. So we're not going to become a media company, but I think about that a lot of how do we build a platform to get these amazing stories out so that there's not a day that we wake up and go, gosh, if only we knew about this amazing thing happening here, we would have been able to change the world. Like that missed connection is the thing we want to avoid.
Wow. It sounds so deep. It's connected in a way. I see connection with vision of your founding chairman in a way that he said. So if somebody's working to save and improve lives, by improving healthcare, then Medical Alley would connect in a way. And of course, combining also with health technology.
Yep, exactly. That vision that Medical Alley is the global epicenter of health innovation and care, and that we want innovators from around the world, if they're working in healthcare, to go, I better go to Medical Alley because I'll find my partners there, I'll find my talent there, or I'll be able to tell my story to a bigger audience. And I even think of, the work HTEC is doing in healthcare and some of the work that you're doing in Medical Alley and the partnership that we're being able to build to tell that story, to bring the unique capabilities of HTEC into this ecosystem and to plug in additional capabilities into HTEC because you're now here. Like that idea is like the very heart of what Earl Bakken, our founder back in 1984, had in mind when he was putting it together.
Everything comes on the right place, coming up. Good. With companies, usually there comes the products, and there are so many products, there's so many clinics, everything is more or less the same. So I will use another example of animal purple cow. It's not about the Milka. It's not as healthy as it should be. So if you think of differentiation, purple cow differentiation by Seth Godin that was set up, how do you see, for example, changes in products and services? One is the telehealth that we said as itself, but is it going deeper? Do we see more and more products and services, or there's solution, or is it going to more personalized way to adapt to each client, or is it more let's say one size fits all?
Yeah, I think personalization and convenience, which sometimes are like two sides of the same coin, are a major point of differentiation in healthcare that has always been there, but been there in a more limited way. So healthcare, at least in the US context, is kind of unique in that a lot of it is ultimately the patient is receiving the care, but often they're not the customer. So the companies that are developing the products and services in healthcare, they're developing them for a customer who's not the end user, right? It's developing for the doctor or for the health system or for the payer. This change to more and more healthcare being consumed at home or remotely, or having control of my healthcare because I have devices that can give me feedback on what's going on, is changing who the end customer is, and either making it where the patient is the customer or the patient is now one of the customers in the value chain. And so I've got to develop my products and services, including their values, which may be quite different. The doctor may value, I made the patient healthy, I removed their sickness, and the patient may say, I want to be symptom-free. Those aren't necessarily the same things. I may have extreme pain medication makes the symptoms go away, but the underlying cause hasn't gone away. And so I think there is significant opportunity in healthcare to create convenient, personalized products and services. We're learning a lot from the consumer companies and the technology companies. You think of Amazon on design and on consumer. Apple on design and consumer, Amazon on convenience. But in healthcare, you then have all these other layers of, well, the doctor's got to want to use it too, and it has to be paid for by someone. And there's these regulations about what you can say about it. So the differentiation, the purple cow, I think, is figuring out how to give the end consumer that thing they want while still fitting into the existing healthcare stream, because while that's going to change, that'll take time. And so we've seen companies that have tried to go direct to consumer with a classically healthcare product, and they really struggle to get past, using crossing the chasm, those early adopters, because most people, they don't want to pay cash for their healthcare. There's a big misnomer about people want healthcare. No, most people don't want to be sick. That's different. And a lot of times I see like tech people, especially engineers, who they're really driven by, wow, what could we do with this monitoring and this technology, this data? Most people, they just want to be free from sickness. Monitoring their sickness, monitoring their health is just a reminder of you're sick, you're a patient. So the purple cow in there is like making the product that you or I would want to use to remove sickness, and that fits within this existing healthcare system enough to actually work as a commercially viable product.
Yeah, great. So B2B2C in a way, with the influence going opposite, even the powered by, let's say big data collected by smartwatches or some other things, that can create, the wave on building the products, back. I think this all this artificial intelligence and big data that can create, amazing. I was talking with a professor on Stanford actually doing this huge data. How you can with this, I don't know even the names. Hexaton of data or something, some huge numbers that were able to do the patterns, of something. It's not about one person, but you can create patterns by data, and especially with medical data, that can create at the end also the products, but still going in so small niches that you can personalize at the end, so that you can exactly bring. So maybe one day it will be just one pill, adapted to our smartwatch, or something, that's exactly by your size, or even weather, or conditions that you're feeling like. And so
but all of that, the patient, they don't want to know any of that stuff. Right? Like Amazon has all of the analytics and AI and everything behind the scenes, but what we want is to find that book, right? Or to find that item and get it home, and that like jobs to be done type of thing, I think is a big opportunity that often gets missed in healthcare, where we're like, look at this whiz-bang technology. That's great. How do you then make it where the patient goes, I like this product? Because they don't buy technology, right? They buy a solution to some problem they have.
Yeah. But what we see here is like Amazon leadership principle number one, it's kind of customer obsession. So you're moving even with the medical, we're bringing patient or even doctor, let's say in the core, let's say in the centric model of the medical itself, not about the product, because technology can develop everything, but if it don't fit to the customer, to the market, it's not gonna fly. Good. And how do you see Medical Alley different compared to other, let's say medical associations?
The two big differentiations that we take really to heart, one is all of healthcare. So it's device, it's drug, it's hospitals, it's insurers, it's suppliers, it's that entire healthcare ecosystem as equals. Because by having that cross-sector interaction, new ideas come up that wouldn't happen if it was only hospitals or only device or only pharma. So that's one. And then the second is this long-term vision that, yes, things are moving fast. We want them to move faster, but we're also willing to do things for a really long time to see them through. That if we want to make real sustainable change, we will commit to doing 10-year projects and see it through, because we know at the other end of it, the potential outcome is so transformative. And I see lots of associations that are more reactive in that. An issue comes up, do something about it. Another issue comes up, do something about it. We spend a lot of time trying to think about what's the world we want to live in, and then how do we go about day by day making that world we want the world we have.
Nice. So building the whole ecosystem that you opened, exactly, it's giving not just homogeneous group, but it's the touching point is the same, no matter from which other industry is coming up, and giving you the big picture for the medicine and persistency, to go your path, 60 or even more years, to develop. How long is now Medical Alley? I missed the
since 1984.
84. Okay. Great. So that was in that year we had Olympic Games in the Balkans, in Sarajevo. Exactly, 1984.
A good year.
So next time we will invite you. Next year we're planning some big conference also in Europe. So we'll invite you, to share. We're planning to do also some health and medical track, to see how we can share and build up this.
I would welcome that. We have the other part of my work is international.
Okay.
And so we do a whole set of different programs around some parts of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and then Canada have kind of been the main areas. But so I'm usually somewhere in Europe, a couple of times a year. And then, right, once you're anywhere in Europe, it's easy to get anywhere else generally. So yeah, if you guys do something, we'd love to support it.
Great. I saw you're also active in Accelerator in Australia.
Yes.
How do you see the difference compared, let's say, now with this overview?
The biggest difference I see, and I see this not just in Australia, but in a lot of places, the healthcare innovation community in Medical Alley is very industry driven and works in partnership with academic research institutions like the University of Minnesota and Mayo Clinic, but it's driven by industry. The work we do in Australia, the work we do in Canada, and the work we do in parts of Europe, I see much more of it that the innovation side is driven by the academic institutions. And I don't know that one way is better or worse than the other, but it is definitely a different approach to the types of technologies that are developed, the way resources are allocated, and then the sort of companies that end up getting built as a result.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, so driven by let's say more like business, or driven by academics, but also academics in US, let's say, are having much closer cooperation, even out of medicine, let's say, much closer cooperation with business, because even business schools are driven by sponsorships and everything. So the circle, it's moving around, all the way.
Yeah, there seems to be a tighter alignment. And then when I think of like the startup side, most of our startup companies come from people who were at one of the large companies and left to start a new company. And then they might even be bringing technology out of that established company to go and develop it or incubate it in a smaller environment. Some of it is licensed from universities, but I'm constantly surprised how much of it is the business driven versus how much of it is academic driven.
Yeah. And that's also by personal choice. Let's say some people prefer one, some people prefer
right.
other. And we are moving to the last of the big five, the butterfly and butterfly wings. So exactly what you mentioned, I really see that as a metaphor for Medical Alley also, in a way, what you do in Minnesota, it's maybe butterfly wing flap of the butterfly wings that can make, huge, hurricane on some other place, some other world, or even globally. Changes or innovation that you're bringing up, can exactly change or save lives, and that's the most important thing when you put all the business and everything aside, so.
Right.
Yeah. And when you think of these personal questions, maybe what do you see, what keeps you going, through your toughest days now with Medical Alley and COVID-19 and changing the models? How do you see your, let's say, superpower?
Yeah. The thing that really keeps me going through it is just the stories from the companies and from the people who are doing the work, and knowing that we do a little bit that helps them to do more. And it's very motivating, but it's also very empowering to think, I'm one small part of this grander thing, right? Maybe I am the butterfly wing. As far as superpower, I think the thing that I've been blessed with, that's worked out really well work-wise for this stuff, is a combination of I have a really, really good memory, and I see connections between things, even if I don't fully understand them. Where that plays out is I go and I meet with companies, I meet with people, I'm hearing their stories. And as I do that over and over again, inevitably in a meeting, I'll hear someone say something, I go, you should meet so-and-so because they're doing this, and that could be potentially a collaboration with your company. And it works more often than it doesn't, that results in a new vendor or a new partnership, an investment, acquisitions have come out of it. And it's from having the ability to like just talk to lots of different people and understand enough to make the connection without getting bogged down in trying to replace you. You're going to be an expert in your thing more than I ever could be. But I want to understand just enough to say you might want to talk to this person because what you're doing could help them or what they're doing could help you.
So you could have another title besides, the VP. It could be even the chief networking officer.
Yeah. It really is my favorite thing to say, like, you two should know each other. And then to find out, like in some cases, a couple of years later, like, oh yeah, they're now coworkers and they started a company together.
Yeah. I know the feeling. I helped few guys, and exactly like you said. I mean, it's some personal satisfaction out of this.
Right.
Is there anything to do also that you're having, for example, red and white wall? Is this also combining, different approaches?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people during the pandemic, caught up on a bunch of reading. One that I read recently that really was just a lot of fun, but also informative was called Never Split the Difference. I forget the author's name, but Never Split the Difference. The guy was the FBI crisis negotiator for many years. And so he talks about negotiation. And he tells the story at the beginning of sitting in on Harvard Business School's negotiation class. And they have to do these mock negotiations. And this is a guy who's been an FBI agent for some years, a negotiator, but not a business guy. And he absolutely destroys the Harvard students. Like every negotiation he's in, he ends up with all of their money. And then the rest of the book is him talking about the things we get wrong about negotiation, the why it's so important to understand people and how it's not rational. It's just these very, very thoughtful things. And it's a very quick read that's written really practically, but deeply insightful. And he used the skills, to free hostages, but has applied it in the business world and personal relationships as a way to not get what you want, but better understand the other person and be able to actually have a real conversation with them instead of just what ends up happening. You want 10, I want 5, so we end up at 7.5, and neither of us are happy.
Chris Voss, Christopher Voss. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing book. I'm just making the list for my holidays, so I'll put it in the list on the top.
It's well really read and it's a quick one.
Yeah, I have. I'm trying my negotiation skills with my kids. They're 4 and 8. And I always lose. They are so good negotiators. I have 2 girls, so you always lose as daddy. And it's they have amazing negotiation skills. Yeah, and here we're touching also the field of inspiration. Thank you for advice for the book. Any other tips? What to read, watch, listen. To stay inspired as you are. To stay so much on the top of innovation in global or in medical. Yeah.
For probably about the last 2 years, I've found listening to Odd Lots, which is a Bloomberg podcast, that they kind of just cover random interesting things in the business world. The last year, a lot of it's been about supply chain and crypto, 2 areas that if you told me, hey, do you want to learn about supply chain or crypto, I would have said no. But it exposed me to things I never would have otherwise come across, and in like deep minutia of seemingly boring things. And it's allowed me to see things that I wouldn't otherwise see that end up being like, oh, that's a different way of thinking about my work. So I love that. And then the other, I'm a big fan of comedy, and like everyone likes to laugh. But the idea of like, what is funny, or how does humor work, and kind of the structures that end up in it, because they tell you a lot about a culture, like what's funny in one place or another tells you a lot about the people there. And that, if you're in any kind of business, it ultimately comes down to trust and good people. And so if you can better understand them, you'll be able to do better business for both parties.
Yeah. So we'll have to find some translation of humor, across the nations, continents.
Indeed.
Yeah. Good. Would you like for the end who would you like to nominate the leader that you would like to hear on some of the future fast forwards?
There is a wonderful CEO by the name of Angie Franks. She runs a company called Central Logic, which is a health technology company that it manages data flow and patient flow in very complex situations that for people who aren't deep in healthcare probably have no idea are as big of an issue as they are. And her and her team have built this incredible business that I think we sometimes get caught up in the super cool, high tech, really visible parts of healthcare, which are great, but there's kind of this hidden back end of healthcare, the machines that make it all work. And Central Logic is making that work better. Fascinating company. Angie's a fascinating person, serial entrepreneur. I think she would make a great conversation.
Thank you, Frank. That will be a great guest. I'm trying to balance, that we have people from not just different gender, not just different speeds, not just different continents, but actually with also one unique thing, that people at the end, can inspire each other, so that's the common thing. Good. I believe we are coming to an end, slowly of the fast forward. So it was amazing hour. It went in front so fast, with you, I could listen so long, and thank you, Frank, very much for sharing all your ideas and all your answers on this big five. And looking forward, that we meet in Minnesota, in Minnesota Silicon Valley, or in some other conference, or when you're on the way to Australia to do some good stopover in Europe also, and we discuss more life and check all the humor that we can find locally.
Perfect. Will do, and thank you. I really appreciate it. Fantastic discussion, and I really appreciate the work HTEC is doing, not just to make better health technology, but to tell stories of innovators like with this Fast Forward podcast. So Niko, thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank.